And hello there, and a very, very warm welcome to you to this Gulf News webinar. Webinar, Residency and Citizenship in Portugal. We're going to answer all your questions in terms of changes on the Golden Visa. So we really, really welcome you all here. And thank you so much. We're live on Facebook and a really great live webinar for all of you. I'm Etna Trainer and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Now, I've been working with Gulf News and many of their webinar and their conference series, but this one's particularly interesting, you know, looking around in terms of residency around the world, and particularly looking at that lovely country in the west of Europe, looking at Portugal. Their Golden Visa scheme that actually started back in 2012, and really it's been proven to be one of the best citizenship by investment programs around the world right now. We're definitely going to be covering all aspects of this, and we're going to be very happy to take your questions. I have a great panel of experts in place, and they'll be able to answer us and let us know what's going on and why Portugal has become such an attractive destination. So I want to welcome here today, joining us, we have the CEO and founder of Savory Partners, Jeremy Savory joins us. Great to have you, Jeremy, on board. We've also got the general manager of the Portugal-based real estate company, BWA Group, that's Duarte Freis. He's joining us as well, and the founding editor of Investment Migration Insider, the IMI Daily.com. That's Christian Nessen. So we've got a great panel here, and I'm really, really delighted. Three very learned gentlemen full of great information for us, and they can actually make sure that we know what's going on in terms of what's happening in Portugal. Jeremy, let me start with you. When we look at, you know, your business and indeed your professional career, really helping people look at residency by investment, and it's something that has become very, very popular around the world. Give us a little bit of background to this, and particularly, you know, why there's a bit of focus on Portugal.
Okay, well, I think Portugal residency and the Golden Visa program has been on the radar for several years. I think what's happened is that its prominence is coming up purely because its price points are now becoming better known to all applicants. Traditionally, it's always been well known as 500,000 euros as the threshold, but now a lot of investors are noticing that there are options at 350,000, 280,000, and then there's also alternatives such as investing through a fund. And in the context of other programs, its peers such as Greece and Spain, a lot of investors are finding it has a nice success story, shall we say, but also a good word of mouth that's coming from previous applicants. So I think that's one of the main drivers why it's becoming more and more popular in recent years, definitely within the last 2 to 3 years.
Duarte, if I may ask you just maybe to follow on from that. I mean, the Portuguese government passed that law and put it in place 2012, really launching that program. As Jeremy says, you know, a lot of people, it's word of mouth, people who settled there telling more. Other people, I got to visit Portugal because a friend of mine who lived in Dubai has actually moved there. So it was, again, that first-hand knowledge to see someone who has moved there. And indeed, a very, very attractive spot. But bring us up to date maybe about some of the specifics particularly and what's on offer if somebody wants to move to Portugal looking for residency and ultimately citizenship. Duarte.
Hi. So basically, just to give you here a small introduction of about the Golden Visa program, everything started in 2012, and in the past 8 years, so you can have an idea, CEF issued around 9,300 something Golden Visas, which sums up around 5.6 billion euros. You have some of this. Most part of this is around real estate. So it's a pretty simple process, actually. If you want to get a permanent residency or citizenship in Portugal, you just need to invest in real estate. So this is one of the many forms that there is. So by picking the real estate, you pick, for example, 500,000 option, or if you want to invest in anywhere in the country, for example.
And this is euro now. We're talking in euro?
We are talking about Portugal.
The currency, 500,000.
500,000 euros, yes, exactly. So basically, you have the option of 500,000, and it all started with the 500,000. Then in 2015, they launched a different amount, which is the 350,000 euros as well. Okay, this is a small different option which allows you to minimize the investment, invest in Lisbon or Porto or in the main cities by a smaller amount. How? You just need to have a sum up between the construction costs plus the property price, and the sum up is 350. So this has, from 2015, it became one of the most successful options in this program. Now, the government also added a smart solution. Would be you have a 20% discount on the 500 or on the 350, the two main options, if you invest in low density areas. Low density areas, what is a low density area, you can ask? A low density area is a certain city or village where the GDP or the amount of population is below 100,000, okay? So this allows the 350 to go for the 280, as Jeremy was explaining. The 280 has been, in the last year, a very famous option and more attractive, since it's more difficult to travel to Portugal.
So we'll talk more about that, but clearly it's affordable, it's attractive, and I mean, we look at those figures, and I think something that people around the world would certainly be taking a look at. Christian, now talk to me. Your magazine, Investment Migration Insider, really, it's the #1 publication looking at investment migration. And, you know, really, when we look at, you know, attracting people to different countries, which many people do, talk to us perhaps about, I suppose, the trend that we're beginning to see and the trends we're beginning to see as to why people, you know, would choose Portugal.
Well, I think what's been most interesting to observe this year is that whereas most investment migration programs around the world have had logistical issues with receiving applications, approving applications, in 2020, Portugal has been the exception. For whatever reason, and I'm sure we'll get into more of what might be the reasons for that, they have been able to maintain their application and approval momentum in 2020. In fact, 2020 has been a statistically normal year for the Golden Visa program in terms of the number of applicants and in terms of the amounts of investment raised. And so that's one of the very interesting statistical trends that we've observed this year, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot more over the course of this conversation.
Well, that's fascinating to know. And yes, we will get into plenty of that. Just before we carry on, just a note to all of our dear audience at home, because we really want you to be involved. If you'd like to ask a question during the webinar, just type it in for us and click down below there. You can see the various commands. I know you're all getting so used to online platforms. Look at questions there at the bottom of your screen. Now also use the chat feature if you want to make a comment. You know, if you want to make, but the question there, make sure it's in questions. We can see that very clear there. Obviously, we're looking forward to a very dynamic discussion. And if you want any more information, of course, on anybody, click to the links that are there too. We're offering that at the top left of your screen that says speakers and booths, you know, so you can look at that. But we have plenty of great information here, you know, to make sure that you got it, you know. And we will have a poll, and indeed, I'm going to put a poll question out there right now just to keep you all involved and to keep you with us. And then I'm going to come back to my 3 great speakers and we're going to continue our discussion. So our poll question to you, our dear audience, is why is Portugal an attractive destination for investment migration? And you can see there, and you're already on the button. Thank you all so much. The low cost of living, the low crime rate, ease of doing business, and again, the fact is widely spoken. So we'll come back to that in just a few minutes and we'll come back on the poll. But Germany, I just want to talk to you a little bit perhaps about the economic outlook in a country like Portugal. It's a beautiful country. It's beautifully positioned there with the Atlantic on one side, the Med on the other. It's idyllic, and it's steeped in history. But economically, how is the country doing? I know the credit ratings agencies, have it as a very stable outlook. And this, of course, is something for people when they're looking to invest. And I know you always must be objective, not too emotional when you're looking to invest. Talk to me about that, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, I think Duarte, being someone with a large organization involved very much in real estate and construction in Portugal, he'd be a better place to talk about from his perspective. But from ours, we're looking at it through the eyes of investors and applicants. And we don't only do Portugal. We cover 12 jurisdictions. We're multi-government accredited agents. We just happen to do Portugal. But what we've noticed is that looking at it through the eyes of investors, we see a very strong case for them taking exposure to Portugal as part of their overall investment plan, but also potential retirement plan, but also just hedging their bets, I would say, in an ever-changing society, an ever-changing
and indeed, you've segued that one, positioned that one for Duarte as well to look at that too. Duarte, come in here and talk to us too, again, in terms of, the economic outlook in the country and, how the country is positioned, quite honestly. We were hearing there from Christian talking about the fact it was a really good year in terms of investment. So tell us a bit more too, about Golden Visa. What's so attractive about it? And you mentioned maybe there might be a few changes in it.
Yeah. Okay. So just to, as Christian mentioned, 2020, it turned out to be a very good year in terms of Golden Visa investment. In fact, we didn't decrease our figures in 2020. We just shifted slightly from one options to the others. For example, in 2020, the 500 option decreased. Even the 400 option decreased, and you could see a lot more investors turning to the 350,000 euros option and the 280 option as well. Now, just to give you to people that don't know Portugal, I can tell you a little bit about the economy. So basically, we are. It was ranked in the 34th position in the World Economic Forum in 29. Sorry. Our Portugal economy is heavily dependent on services, around 74.4% of our GDP, with special focus on the tourism industry. So you can imagine that 2020 we had quite a hit in terms of tourism. So in terms of the remaining 25%, it's divided between agriculture and industry as well, 23% around that. But since I've been looking around, and the European Commission statistics on the GDP forecast growth is around 5.4% in 2021 and 3.5% in 2022. So we expect that this Golden Visa program will help a lot on this growth in 2021 actually. And going back to your question on the changes of the Golden Visa. We have it's not we have there's not much clarity on the changes there will be. We know exactly that until June 30 everything will maintain the same. Okay, so we have that. After that, we know that the government wants to raise the minimum investment in specific areas, for example, Lisbon, Porto, Algarve. So within the next 2 years, we know that will happen. So we have this deadline until July. 1st of July, where if we have and we advise our investors that want to go forward with this program to do so before this specific date. Now we can tell we have been listening to some rumors that they might be, due to the situation, they might postpone this date, but it's nothing official. So for now we have to count on this specific date.
Well, and indeed, I wouldn't, when we look at, I think, a successful investment program like that in the bigger cities, they could up that level. There's nothing, I wouldn't be surprised about that at all, because they're looking to see that it's become attractive. And why not? Everybody, it needs to be a win-win for everybody. Indeed. Let's just take a look, and maybe I'll keep you here, Duarte, on this one. Why, the results of our poll, why is it so attractive? Low cost of living seems to be absolutely winning out on that one. So Duarte, maybe stay with me a minute and comment on this. Low cost of living, 65% of our audience thinks this is the main reason that people would want to be there. Again, we've 12% looking at the lower crime rate, ease of doing business, 13%, and English, widely spoken, 10%. But English actually is spoken, and that helped too. But come back to us in terms of like a lower cost of living, and I suppose more value for money if you're going to be particularly perhaps retiring there, or making any kind of investment in property and living there maybe as a second home or whatever. Are you finding that that's really what's attractive?
Absolutely, Ethan. I think that the low cost of living and the quality of life that you have, value for money, exactly like you were saying, I think it's our number one, honestly. You have tons of reasons why there's this such amount of investment and why the program is actually one of the best in the world. But it all goes down to, in my opinion, the quality of life that you have at so affordable price. But like a lot of things, it's a combination of factors that I can. We are ranked the number 3 safest country in the world, for example. This aligned with the affordable prices, it goes a long way. And then you have access to the whole European at half an hour flight, 1 hour flight, 1 hour and a half. You can access a lot of countries in Europe. So I think this is a combination of factors, honestly.
It really is,
yeah. And to comment on the English part, everywhere you go in Portugal, people know well English. It's a well-known language, and you can do your daily life even if you don't know a word of Portuguese. You won't have any struggle. Okay.
Yes, indeed. I noticed that when I was there, even in the rural parts of the country, exactly, people understand English. It's not their first language, as in most countries, but you do feel that, and it's very warm and welcoming. We'll get on to that in a minute. Christian, I want to bring you in here. And when we look back on 2020 particularly, and but did you see more applications, less applications? How did the pandemic actually affect applications and indeed approvals, for visas? What did you find in the last year?
Well, what we found was that essentially Portugal in 2020 had 5% fewer applicants than in 2019, which is statistically speaking unremarkable, particularly in light of the observation that most other programs with which Portugal competes around the world have had a reduction in the number of applications and in the number of approvals. That's not because they are less popular this year than they were in the past, but it's because they've had technical issues, logistical issues with actually processing applications during government mandated lockdowns, during closed borders, and so on. Portugal has been able to keep that processing more or less uninterrupted. And so the reward for that, obviously, is that their program, rather than going down in 2020 like most others have, they've stayed pretty much flat. And staying flat in 2020 in itself is an achievement.
Yes, indeed it is, because I think it's a very competitive landscape at the moment. So the fact that we have those figures, I think that's very, very encouraging, and hopefully they're going to see a bit of an uptake on that. Let's go to a second poll question, because I can see people are involved, and thank you for sending in little hand waves and little cheers to us. Where it always keeps us, when we're all here looking into our computers, it's nice to have that connectivity with all of you. So thank you for that. Let's have a look. Our second poll question, we'll get it up there. How soon can you attain Portuguese citizenship through the Golden Visa program? So what do you think out in terms of, let's get that second poll question up there. How soon can you attain Portugal citizenship through the Golden Visa? Let's have a look at that one. And while you're looking at that second poll question there, I'd like to, Jeremy, come back to you really and look at, how does this Golden Visa program, how does it compare, with other similar European CBI programs? And also, I mean, the fact that it's highly ranked up there, Jeremy, with, many other countries that are, one would say, a great country to be part of. So Portugal it's positioned well. Jeremy, what do you think in terms of comparison?
I think we're in comparison. I think definitely when you consider the low density option of 280,000 euros, I mean, Greece's Golden Visa is 250,000 euros. Spain's is at 500,000 euros. Ireland has a program at 1 million euros. So, I mean, at that price point, it's very attractive, given that there's visibility on applying for citizenship. Given the economic situation, given the fact that it has a track record behind it, I think also it's becoming it's getting a lot of traction, because I think a lot of people see parallels with Portugal's position, given the fact that everyone speaks English, the time zone is GMT, the fact that is a very attractive, highly motivated population of young people fluent in English. A lot of people draw parallels with the Celtic Tiger in the early 2000s, or even Dubai in the early 2000s, a lot of touristic demand that underpins that growth. So a lot of people see a very attractive success story.
Indeed, yes. And I know, you have your own personal story there, so maybe you'll share a little bit of that with us too, in terms of, being able to live there. And again, it's got a lot going for it, without a doubt.
Yeah, I've been. It's been 4 years since we've been coming on and off. We don't have any particular affinity, myself and my family. We don't have a drop of Portuguese blood in us. We don't have any assets here. But just by coming in, it allows us to be objective and just see it for what it is. I think definitely the welcome that we've had, the politeness of the people, the ease of getting around, the culture, the history, the diverse landscapes. I mean, we went up to the mountains and went skiing. In Christmas. I mean, I never knew that Portugal had ski resorts. I think also the fact that the cost of living is highly attractive. I mean, it's probably the only place I can think of you can get an espresso for less than €1. So I think just definitely we've had very positive experience. And so this passes on to our clients when we're looking at it through the eyes of our clients.
Indeed, yeah, and I think they're probably even more encouraged when they know that you live it through too. Now, even when I was asked to do this, I was very excited, because, as I said, I've been there, and it's been a real eye opener. And one of the lovely things I also noticed, and Duarte, perhaps when you look at the real estate in the region and what's on offer, and I was in some of the smaller villages, and I could see actually a tremendous sense of life coming back to these villages, because more people had moved in, they had renovated houses, and there were small businesses opening or reopening, craft shops. I mean, there was a great feel of energy around the place. And particularly when you look at that concept of the Golden Visa, and you say also getting away from the main cities to actually come outside, and nowhere is too far away, and it's a beautiful drive to get back to the main city. So what's the real estate that's on offer there? What kind of real estate are you looking at, Duarte?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. You are close to everywhere. So basically, you can reach any part of Portugal in very fast. And you are completely correct when you say that this Golden Visa program is a huge impact for these villages. As you mentioned, you walk around these villages, you see a different life, and you can tell, for example, in Alcácer 5 years ago, you wouldn't see one renewed building. Now you go there, and most of the city is renewed and brings more restaurants, more shops. It brings new life for these cities. So I would say that this program has been very critical and very important for many cities in Portugal.
Now, just looking at the results of our poll here, and Christian, I want to bring you in on this one as well too. When we look at, getting the citizenship and the importance of being able to get residency for that investment. I mean, this is what your editorial looks at constantly too. In the majority of people at home looking at this are saying that citizenship within 6 years. So what's the procedure when you apply for this? Obviously you'll get residency after a certain time, and then after a certain time to that, you're going to get citizenship. And what do you need to do to actually get that citizenship? Because it's opening up really all of Europe to people.
Yeah, well, I want to first make the distinction between citizenship by investment programs and residency by investment programs. It's important to make that distinction because residency by investment programs gives you residency, which may lead to citizenship if you live in that country over time. Citizenship is direct. Citizenship by investment programs are direct to citizenship. Now, what Portugal has is a residency by investment program, but crucially, and this is key, and this is something that industry observers are constantly watching for in the market, is there a viable path to citizenship through the residency program? Okay, and in Portugal, we got that answer categorically last year. Yes, there is a viable path to citizenship in Portugal through the Golden Visa. And the way that works is that first you obtain your Golden Visa, which initially is valid for 2 years, then you get a 3-year extension. In year 5, you are eligible to apply for permanent residency. And once you have your permanent residency, you are able to apply for citizenship in that country. Now, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get a citizenship in that country. There are certain things that you need to do. For example, you must demonstrate that you have a cursory knowledge of Portuguese society and Portuguese language. And then you can submit your application for citizenship. And what we're seeing, which is so exciting, well, when the story came out last year, what was so exciting is that we're seeing the first few Golden Visa applicants who started their journey 6 years ago, they're now getting their citizenships in Portugal. And that was never a given. And so I personally was very positively surprised when I saw that happening.
Wow, that's a great story indeed, yes. And I'm sure you're going to be seeing more and more of that happening in the next year and in the years to come. Jeremy, we're getting a few questions, and we're getting a lot of questions in. So thank you all at home so much for engaging with us. And one question here, and I'm not surprised at all, this is coming in. It comes from Pradeep, and it says, living in Dubai, we are used to zero income tax. Is there a favorable tax structure in Portugal, and what's attractive about that for anybody who might want to move there? Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dubai is really a country that has a very attractive proposition being, tax-free. There is VAT at 5%, however. I think if you're going to compare it, you can't compare apples with pears. What I could say in Portugal is that, yes, you do have income tax and capital gains tax, but given the fact that the cost of living is less than most countries, it's the lowest cost of living in Western Europe. It's very inexpensive. And there's also the option for some applicants to apply through the non-habitual residency program, which is another program which is, not the same as the Golden Visa. It's another option which is targeted at different applicants. And that one's extremely attractive because it allows you to be able to have residency in the EU. And provided it's structured correctly, it's very, very advantageous from a tax perspective. You can be 0 to 10% on all your global income. So yes, it does have a very attractive tax position. It's not as cut and dried as the same as Dubai, but the cost of living, when you calculate at the end of the month, it's much less expensive as cost of living.
And just a follow up on that too. I mean, if you are to live there and you're to get your residency and then ultimately to get your citizenship, perhaps you wanted to retire there, it also has a very good health system, I believe, in Portugal as well. So how does that fit in for somebody who might be looking at this, for the longer term?
Well, you have a very good health system. You have a very good education system as well. It's not only people at that stage in their life, it's only at the earlier stages. Actually, going back to what Christian said earlier about the changes that the announcement that was made just over a year ago regarding obtaining citizenship after the permanent after the 6-year term, is that actually I think he can also elaborate on the change that was recent regarding those people already with doing residency, not yet at the citizenship stage. If they were to have a newborn child, that child would immediately be able to apply for Portuguese citizenship within 1 year of birth. Christian, can you clarify more on that one?
Certainly. So, crucially, in the world, there are, broadly speaking, two ways of naturalizing newborns, or two ways that you bestow citizenship upon newborns. One is called jus solis, which means the law of the soil. One is called jus sanguinis, which means law of blood. And law of blood is more common around the world, so that, if you're, for example, my parents are Norwegian, and doesn't matter where I was born, I'm a Norwegian by birth. That's jus sanguinis. The Americans have jus solis. So if you're born in America, it doesn't matter where your parents are from, you're American. In Portugal, this year, they introduced something that comes very close to being law of the soil, so jus solis, which is specifically, they changed their citizenship law so that if a child is born in Portugal on Portuguese soil, and one of their parents, at least, has lived physically in Portugal for at least 12 months, even if they were there illegally, that child is automatically eligible for Portuguese citizenship. And so that's very interesting, because that means that you can move to Portugal today, apply through a golden visa. You're not going to be a citizen until, at the earliest, after 6 years. But if you have a child after you've lived for 1 year in Portugal, then that child will get citizenship in Portugal after they can apply instantly. So essentially, your children, if they are born after you become a golden visa resident, they will be citizens several years before yourself.
Gosh, and just stay with me on that one, Christian. How does that work for the social security benefits in that too? Will residents, be eligible for like healthcare and that, or will that have to wait until citizenship? So should people be looking to come with, topped up private insurance, health insurance, or, will the residency qualify them for that, or will they have to wait until they become citizens? And that's from Bukima on the social security.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have private health insurance, even if you're from, the best public health systems. But having said that, obviously, once you are a citizen of a country, you have precisely the same rights as natural-born citizens. As to whether you have the same rights as a resident and not a citizen, that's a little bit different, and I'll defer to Duarte on that, because I'm not sure about the answer.
Yeah, you have access to the public healthcare for the Portuguese healthcare, which is one of it's ranked the 30th in the world, if I'm not mistaken, and you have immediately access to the public healthcare in Portugal.
As a resident, or you have to wait until you're a resident?
As a resident. And
okay.
In the private, it's normal. You of course, you have access. You just pay like everyone else. But as a public, from the beginning, from resident, you have access.
Now, Duarte, stay with me, because I'm getting a few questions in on sort of clarifying, the actual amount of investment. And also a question here from Ziad. Can the applicant's path to citizenship be affected by the law changes that could happen during the 5-year golden visa? Or once the golden visa has been received, will current laws apply to the applicant's case, and then new laws only to new applicants? So let's say the application is put in now, as you say that many times you're advising people to do it now. will that remain under the current laws, or will that shift as it goes?
It will remain as the current law. Basically, you just need to submit before the changes, and you remain with the current law. It doesn't change with the laws.
Yeah, so I think that's very, very important in terms of what people are looking at, and so if you want to get in now, the laws are pretty clear. And Duarte, I'll keep you just as we go on this one, and then I'll move back to Jeremy for a question. But Duarte, what kind of property could you expect in Portugal for that 280,000 euros? What are we looking at? Would you be looking at moving to the villages, and or is that level really designed for the areas outside the main cities?
So it's kind of designed for the outside cities. So, of course, real estate is all about location. And once you are targeting the 280, you are talking about perhaps a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, depending on the location, but a nice one, even maybe slightly bigger in these low density areas. We can talk about 100 square meters around that. Yes.
And are we seeing a lot of, upgrades of old buildings? Are they on the market being sold, or are we looking at a lot of new build as well?
No. This law only applies, the 280 only applies for rehabilitation projects. So old buildings, it has to be in certain areas, rehabilitation areas that the government pick precisely. They draw mostly around the center of the villages or the cities, historical centers, or you can pick a building that is more than 30 years old. Okay, so one of the two, and then with a renovation, a complete renovation, which in Portugal is kind of a brand new construction, the quality of it. So we are talking about rehabilitation projects.
And this makes great sense, because why wouldn't the government, want to entice everybody to come to particularly the more rural areas and actually help with rural renovation? Because it makes great sense. They've got something wonderful in return in terms of your residency, a beautiful place to live. So yes, that's nothing surprising. That happens, I think, in countries around the world, and I can understand why the Portuguese government would want to do that. And I can see the benefits for those small villages, and I've already seen them firsthand. Jeremy, if I can come back to you when we look at, the difference in buying, what property is available. Can you also, as investment, and you mentioned it early, somebody here, Arda, mentions the benefits of buying property in Portugal. What about options of hotel investments, with payback guarantees as direct investments to the bank without actually buying anything? Is that a possibility? And what are the thresholds in this? Other forms of investment rather than physically going there and buying a real estate that you're going to live in?
There are those options. The great thing is that the more that the program has evolved, then the greater the choices become. You now have options of investing with recognized hotel brands, Hilton, Marriott. Tourism is such a key influence with Portugal. Its tourism statistics are really very high. I think it's been voted one of the Lisbon and Porto have been voted the top places to visit by the World Travel Organization, and it's a very attractive. Tourism is just so important. To give you an idea, with the lockdown that happened, tourism dropped so much that rents actually they dropped a little bit in Lisbon and Porto. And so as a result of this, it's become even more affordable to come when you consider how much rent is as a cost of living. But that also tells you how much that once lockdown is lifted and the whole world returns to as it was in prior to 2020, it also tells you how much the rents are going to go up and how much tourism is a key indicator on your revenue, on your investments. So yes, either through a fund that invests in the hospitality sector or through a direct real estate that is managed and rent is secured and guaranteed by very large international hotel chains. Yes, there are those options, and clients are they invest a lot in that option.
And that gives you the guarantee of residency and maybe down the road. But then if you want the citizenship, you really need to be spending a lot more time and perhaps living there.
You don't have to stay in the same place that you're investing in. We have some clients who've said, look, I just want to do this as a low risk entry. Then I'm going to go and see where I feel comfortable living, where I want to be based, and then maybe rent something or buy something separate. We've had clients who've invested from 280,000 euros up to 3.3 million euros. It really depends on what you want, and it doesn't always necessarily need to be the same thing.
Okay. Duarte, thank you for that, for clarifying that. Looking at the process, or actually maybe I'll give this one to Christian, in terms of how does one go about this? Like where I've got a few questions around this is, how do you get started? How do you get this rolling? And I'm sure, Jeremy would definitely be able to help people and do the work for us, so to speak. But Christian, perhaps just, when we look at it at a more general level around the country, how do you start applying, so to speak?
Well, the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is you need to decide whether Portugal is the right answer for you. And although Portugal is a fantastic location there, it's important, like Jeremy says, to consider all your options. But presuming that you've decided on Portugal, then the first thing you need to do is figure out, okay, what type of investment is it that I want to make? Do I want to make it because it's different. If you're buying a residential property for you to live in, that's different from buying one that you're buying as an investment, maybe to rent out, maybe hoping for capital gains, right? And so you have to consider all of that. And that means that you're going to have to look at the different local markets within Portugal, because they're very different from each other. Obviously, central Lisbon property is going to be extremely different from beachfront property in the Algarve. And then you have to consider, okay, well, how much capital am I willing to put up for this? There are different options for that, and then I would talk to specialists. It's not something that I would venture into on my own without advice. But of course, it has to be trustworthy specialists, and Jeremy is one of those.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect segue into you there, Germany. What would you say? Obviously, get in touch with you in terms of you'd be able to make this process a lot simpler, because like I would imagine, any country buying property in any country, moving to any country, there's still quite a bit of rape that, whether we like it or not, one has to go through. So how can you ease that process for people?
I think the key thing is just, as you mentioned, simplification. We've been working in many jurisdictions for many years, so we use that best practice to look at Portugal. And what we found was it can be a bit hairy at times, because let's say you contact a real estate broker. The real estate broker will say, look, I'm not involved in the Golden Visa. I'm going to refer you to a law firm, and vice versa. Law firms say, listen, if you want to go and find a property, go and speak to a broker. And then there's this kind of strange triangle where basically there's no one really taking the lead or ownership of the whole process. And so what we've seen is an opportunity for us, being very much on the ground there, being very much au fait with the way that business is done and the process and everything. We just say, look, we're just going to take care of the whole thing for you. We'll apply best practice from other jurisdictions, so the vetting procedure, the tender process, and make sure that we know the real estate. I mean, we've spent months and months driving around, looking at everything, knocking on doors, seeing all the property, but also ensuring that we have the right co-counsel involved in the process. And I think that objectivity is really critical for investors from our experience.
And just stay with me on that. There's a question that came in here from Alwyn. Has there been a shift in the time frame when we look at people investing during the pandemic? Because I know the flights from Dubai to Portugal are definitely open, but you can't just hop on flights because you want to go on a holiday these days or anything. So there's also reasons, and there's also, how is it in these times, I suppose, in terms of the process? I mean, buying a property, you can't really do it overnight, but, give us a feel for what that time frame might be. If I register my interest, my money, and I've committed and I've decided, how long might that process take?
Well, initially, just like a lot of countries around the world, and not just within the immigration space, there have been things that have been going slower than normal. But we saw that as a way just to be more creative and to try and find solutions. I mean, you can't just wait for things to happen. So, for example, sometimes we've noticed that when there were backlogs in people going to Lisbon and Porto, so city centres, to be able to commence their residency process, you could go to lower density areas such as Aveiro and Coimbra, where there'd be shorter queues, and then you could save yourself a month or two. So we've been applying the same logic to all of our applicants to make sure that they don't lose valuable time. Of course, some things are out of our control because, governments right now, with everything that's going on, the flights, everything is changing on a daily basis. But we've managed to mitigate it quite considerably well, I believe.
Right. Let's do another poll question. We've just got about 15 minutes left in our webinar. So to all of you at home, let's have a look here. And we have one final poll question. And I know you've been listening to what we've all been talking about and what our great experts here are actually talking about this program here. So I have a very simple third poll question. It's very simple. And in terms of what you're listening to, it might be a little bit subjective, this one, the one that we put in place. But let's see. Is Portugal the best European residency and citizenship option? A yes or a no there. It's a simple, straightforward one that we're actually just getting you a straightforward question here in terms of what you think on that poll. So we'll put it up there and get that live poll for you. It's not reflecting on mine at the minute, but I know it will just pop up at the minute. So Portugal, is it a good place? And already, this is a no-brainer. I don't even have to wait for the results on this one. We can see them right there. The results on this is Portugal, the best European residency and citizenship option. We have an awful lot of big fans out there. So Duarte, I'm going to go to you. The majority of people seem to be quite convinced in terms of the fact that this is a great option. A few people are talking to me about, if you invest, who gets citizenship? Is it you? Is it your family? Can you talk to me about that in terms of it being a good place to go, clearly, and then how easy is it for the family to get citizenship or to get residency to get started?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to get started, and the whole family can be included in or under the same folder as the main investor. So there are specific rules, of course. For example, if you want to include your family on the same folder on your same investment, they have to be financial dependent on you. For example, there's no limited age for them to get in your file, but at least there has to be this dependency. They have to be studying. They cannot be working already. But yeah, that's mainly the only two limitations that you have to gather your family under the same umbrella. So I would say that's also a pretty good advantage on the Portuguese residency program, is that you can involve the whole family within your folder.
Christian, a question for you here, Taizoun, and let's see, you might be able to answer part of this, and maybe I'll bring Duarte back in for other part of it. So, because it's quite an elaborate question here. How long, first of all, do people need to keep that property? And do we need to give a test for Portugal? Do we need to stay only in Portugal, or can we move around the EU having got that residency? And when you've got citizenship, I think it's very easy to move, but particularly on that area. And what's the difference in, there's so many elements on this question. So let's just stay with that first element part of it there, coming from Taizoun, in terms of how long to stay and how long you keep the property, all of that. Can you address that question?
Yeah. Hi, Taizoun. I think there's a lot of questions there, but let's start with the first one. So how long do we need to keep the property? Well, you need to maintain your investment for the duration of the initial 5 years until you get your permanent residency. And Duarte, please interrupt me if I'm saying anything that's incorrect. But for the first 5 years, until you are a permanent resident, you must maintain that property. After that, you could sell it. Exactly. How do we need to give a test for Portugal? So presuming that you're talking about a test at the citizenship stage, so there's no test that you need to give to get a golden visa, except, of course, they check your background, but you don't need to sit an exam to get a golden visa. But if you want to get citizenship, then yes, you will need to do a test on Portuguese, but at a reasonably rudimentary level, you don't need to be a very advanced speaker of Portuguese. And you also need to know a thing or two about Portuguese culture. 3, do we need to stay only in Portugal, or can we stay anywhere in the EU? Well, you need to spend 35 days over the initial 5-year period in Portugal, and at least a little bit every year. But apart from that, you can be anywhere else that you want. Obviously, a Portuguese residence permit gives you the right to move about freely within the Schengen area for 3 months every 6 months. Once you become a citizen, if you end up becoming a citizen, then you can even settle all across the European Union. But yeah, so just to briefly answer that question, no, you do not need to physically remain in Portugal, except for a few days each year.
Super. Duarte, I'm getting quite a few questions in again around the threshold and the money. And a question from Yassine here. Do you anticipate a change in the threshold for the 280,000 properties starting from July? So while that is probably the lowest at the moment, 280,000 euros, do you think that one will change, Duarte? And could that be raised higher, or could we be just looking perhaps at what are you hearing out there?
Yeah, so until now, there's no clarity about exactly what it's going to, how much it's going to raise. But what I can anticipate, or in my opinion, is that the 280 will remain as 280, since the government wants to incentive and attract investors to go to these low density areas. And if you kind of raise that value, it's a big value for some of these cities in the low density areas. So I would say my hint would be it will remain the same. But again, this is just my opinion, because there's no clarity about what's going to happen. So in my opinion, I think it will maintain that, but in low density areas.
Yes, and indeed, I would think it would make sense in those low density areas, because 280,000 euros in a low density area is going to get you, a nice bit of property that you can actually, do some work on it. And, just look at the map, you can go from east to west in no time at all. North to south, it's a little bit of a longer and more beautiful drive, a bit more of a distance. But, it's still, there's some good value, I would say, still to be had in some of those smaller regions. Jeremy, let me bring you in here, because there are a few questions that we're having around alternative funds and how else you can get in there. And this, a particular one from Chris saying, just basically, can you elaborate on the fund route? But other people talking about, other investment avenues, I suppose, to come into the market. Jeremy?
Well, I mean, we're not a fund management company. We're not a fund advisor and immigration firm, but we do deal with multiple fund management companies and funds in Portugal. We've been to all of them. We've been to their offices. We've physically done met them face to face. We've checked all their brochures and also the underlying assets. What we've noticed is that there is a lot of focus on hospitality. There's always there's mixed real estate funds, so a little bit of commercial, a little bit of residential in some of these funds, which right now, as you can imagine, are probably very undervalued. So it'll be a very attractive time to consider. But there's also some that focus on outside of the real estate sector. So research and development, tech, green tech as well. And some of those our clients have gone on with because they see a lot of innovation in Portugal. I mean, it's the host of the annual Web Summit, which is the largest summit in the internet and technology space in the world. So we have access to a lot of different funds, and we've checked them all out, and we like that there's a wide range. There's another one which we're looking at, which is a student housing, very much focused on student housing. They've done their research. They say that the upside potential is like the UK was 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, there's some very exciting options.
Thank you so much. Christian, if I can, maybe both Christian and Duarte on this one, talking about, when you're there in terms of your residency, can you move around and work and live in other countries in Europe? And can you take advantage of educational opportunities, particularly like somebody who mentioned here, Arda mentioned, like in Germany, that, can you enroll in Germany, the free or like a discounted for, Germans, obviously, and Europeans. So what's the situation on that when you're on residency? I think everything is automatic when you're on citizenship, but when you're on residency, what can you do and where can you live and work? Christian.
Okay. Yeah. So just to briefly explain it again, once you are a resident of Portugal, doesn't matter if it's temporary or permanent, once you're a resident of Portugal, you can freely move about the Schengen area. You only have the right to live in Portugal. You don't have the right to live anywhere else. But for purposes of the Golden Visa program, you don't need to spend more than between 5 and 7 days a year in Portugal, and at the end of the 5 years, you will still get a permanent residency. So that's the answer to that. And now the very good news that we got last year when we saw the first Golden Visa applicants gaining citizenship is that they gained citizenship on the basis of having spent 35 days total in the last 5 years in Portugal. So they spent 35 days in Portugal overall. At the end of 5 years, they're still getting citizenship because they learned basic Portuguese and they learned about the Portuguese culture. And so just briefly to answer that question, do I have to remain in Portugal? No, you do not. As for the educational possibilities and the difference between residency and citizenship in terms of the rights you have for education, I'll ask Duarte to answer that.
Duarte, on that education, we had a few questions on that one. People curious and interested in terms of how they can move around from country to country.
Yeah, about the moving around, I think Kristen just addressed the question regarding the education system. During the residency program, you can have access to multiple universities that we have in Portugal. But after the citizenship, yes, you can have access to the remaining of European Union to universities. But during the residency program, it allows specifically to Portugal. Then, in terms of other countries within European Union, it depends on each country and their agreements. But I would say it's a strong point, a strong appeal to have a residency to go study elsewhere within the European Union. Yes.
Yeah, and again, I do believe that even within countries within the European Union, they have different relationships among each other. I mean, I think there's a very low threshold if you're Irish and you want to go to Irish universities. If you're English, it's a lot different. If you want to jump back and forth, it's not the same. You don't automatically get the Irish rights if you're coming from England or Portugal or somewhere else. So again, I think it's something that everybody has to research in terms of each different country. Duarte, stay with me on this too, because I have a question here about joint ownerships and how many joint owners, this coming from Nikhil here, how many joint owners can purchase a property? Is there a limit on the number? So an example, like a husband and wife are joint owners, so they have 50-50 each, and or a husband and wife and their child as joint owners. Are there any specific rules on joint ownership?
So for start, if they're husband and wife, most probably they are in the same folder, so they can have the same property. Yes, since they are in the same family. Now, if their daughter, for example, if she's older and she needs a different file, there's no limit for the joint venture, for the joint ownership of a property. The limit that you have is the minimum investment limit. I mean, let's say that you want to invest in a property in low density area, where the minimum is 280. If you want two people to have the access to the Golden Visa, you have to multiply it by 2. So you can buy, for example, a whole building if you fulfill the 280 plus 2. Okay, so that will always be the limit joint ownership. For example, if you go to Lisbon and you want to have a joint ownership, and it's not a rehabilitation, the minimum that you have to buy is 1 million. Okay, because it's a combination of two minimum amounts, 500 plus 500.
So again, it's about really looking at all of the detail on that. We're coming to the close here. Jeremy, I've got just about a 60 second, I've got almost just about a minute left for you to sort of wrap this up. And a few questions we had, maybe you could include this too. fine, you want to go in, you want to buy your property, but what's on top of that? I mean, like if we buy a property in any country, we have different fees. And, you know, even if you arrange all this for us, we have another certain fee. So what should you maybe add on to the price of the property if you're thinking of buying? And just in general, wrap it up for us in terms of why Portugal?
Well, I think, when you buy anything, of course, there's associated fees. So you'll have your closing costs on the property. You'll also have an annual tax for owning the property. It's a very small tax. But also you can have the fees associated with the PR renewals. I would just say, basically, if you were looking at Portugal right now, I would say the amount of demand that is coming around the world, we've had such a diverse spread of nationalities, but we've seen an enormous wave of American citizens applying for the residency, and we've still got Brexit to properly come through, so British nationals such as myself can apply for the Golden Visa. And then you have the normality coming back, which is going to push prices up. So I would say to people, just look, property prices didn't drop last year. This year, they're very stable, and you've still got a lot more upside to come because of those enormous demographics that are going to start investing. I just think there's and let's be honest, the price is not going to go down for these type of programs. If anything, the horizon is in sight, and not all good things last forever.
Indeed. So it is the time to get involved. Thank you so much for wrapping that up for us. And just quickly to all of you at home to remind you of the results of our polls there. You know, people really looking at why Portugal is an attractive destination for investment and really looking at good value and a lower cost of living was the priority there. Looking at your citizenship, we're talking about, 6 years. And then again, looking at is Portugal, one of the best residencies for citizen options in Europe. And it was a resounding yes that came from all of you. So really it's, that's all we have time really for. So again, thank you so much for all of your involvement. Thank you for your questions. And again, if you want to get some more details on our speakers there, you can check still online and look at the speakers link at the top of your screen and find out lots more and then be able to actually contact with everybody there. And of course, if you want to read more about today's topic, we'll have a follow-up story on Gulf News for you. So keep an eye out on gulfnews.com where we are regularly covering what we're doing here. So it's great to actually have the webinar and then have a follow-up story for you to be actually able to keep you in touch. So I just want to thank our great panel here. It was really wonderful. We're getting lots of claps coming in here for you all. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Jeremy Savory, the CEO and founder of Savory Partners, Duarte Reis, the general manager for BWA Group, and Christian Nesem, the founding editor of Investment Migration Insider, IMI Daily. So plenty we can all read there, and you can find out what's going on. I just want to thank you, all of our dear audience, for your great time. Ethna Trainer is my name. I'll be back with you on Gulf News for many more sessions. It's always a delight to be here with you. And of course, I want to thank our team who put all the webinar together and the great work that they're doing at Gulf News to stay connected with you and to bring you these webinars on a regular basis. So we're delighted that you take the time, so many of you, to tune in and to be with us for this. So just before we close, saying farewell to you for today now, I want to leave you with a video and looking at what's going on in Portugal. And of course, this video coming from our great Savory Partners. So farewell to all of you and have a lovely evening and stay tuned and stay online with Gulf News. Thank you.
aos 90. Ele vai!